The train from Paris wheezed to a stop at Melun Station on a gray September morning in 1893, and our mycologist, Henri Roussel, descended onto the platform with his leather cases of collecting equipment. 38 years had etched fine lines around his eyes, the mark of a man who spent his days peering through magnifying lenses at the hidden kingdoms that flourished in shadow and damp. His colleagues at the Natural History Museum called him meticulous, perhaps overly so. But Henri knew that in the world of fungi, the difference between medicine and poison often lay in the smallest detail. The hired carriage to Barbizon jolted over rutted roads, past fields where peasants bent over the late harvest. Henri watched them with the detached interest of a naturalist observing worker ants. 3 years had passed since Marie's death, and he had learned to see the world this way, through glass, at a safe distance. The commission from Baron de Montmorency offered escape from Paris laboratories that still echoed with her remembered laughter. Simple survey work, the Baron's letter had stated. Catalogue the forest resources for potential development. Barbizon village appeared through morning mist like something from a painter's canvas. Indeed, artists had made it famous these past 50 years. The Auberge du Cheval Blanc stood at the main crossroads, its timber frame dark with age, windows glowing amber in the weak sunlight. The innkeeper, Monsieur Duval, greeted Henri with the practiced warmth of a man who had welcomed countless Parisians seeking rustic charm. But it was his daughter who caught Henri's attention. Marguerite Duval moved through the common room with purposeful grace, directing servants, checking ledgers, her dark hair pinned severely back. When introduced, her handshake was firm, businesslike. "Another scientist," she observed, not unkindly. "We had a botanist last month. Found nothing but common species. Left disappointed." "I seek the uncommon in the common, mademoiselle," Henri replied, setting down his cases. "Fungi are humble things, but they hold the forest together." She studied him with intelligent gray eyes. "The forest holds many things together, monsieur. Some better left undisturbed." The common room buzzed with local talk over evening wine. Henri listened, cataloging conversations as he would specimen notes. Timber prices, the Baron's new fences, a poacher caught near Apremont. Then, lowered voices, the whispering Glade. An old farmer crossed himself. "My grandfather heard them voices 60 years past. Told him the day he would die, and he did, to the very date." Henri's analytical mind engaged. Mass hysteria? Acoustic phenomena? He made discreet inquiries. The glade lay deep in the forest, a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks. Those who ventured there heard voices, sometimes familiar, sometimes strange, always unsettling. The local priest, Father Bernard, had tried to bless the spot, but even he admitted to feeling uneasy there. "Superstition feeds on isolation," Henri wrote in his journal that night, his small room under the eaves lit by a single candle. Yet he added, with the honesty that made him a good scientist, "But nature often provides rational explanations for our deepest fears." Morning brought Gustave Moreau, the gamekeeper, assigned as Henri's guide. 52 years had made the man part of the forest itself, his clothes the color of bark, his movements silent as leaf fall. His handshake was brief, calloused, suspicious. "The Baron wants his survey," Moreau said simply. "I'll show you what you need to see." They spent the day establishing Henri's work pattern. Moreau knew every tree, every stream, but hurried past certain areas with muttered excuses. "Poor soil there. Nothing of interest. Dangerous footing. Henri noticed, but didn't press. Trust, like fungal networks, grew slowly underground before showing itself. That evening, Henri found Marguerite in the inn's kitchen garden, gathering herbs by lamplight. For father's rheumatics, she explained, showing him feverfew and willow bark. Her knowledge impressed him, not mere folk wisdom, but understanding of active principles. My mother taught me before she died. The forest provides, if you know how to ask. Henri recognized the loneliness in her efficiency, the way she moved through necessary tasks without expecting more. It was familiar territory. They spoke of plant alkaloids and the new chemical preparations from Germany until her father called her inside. Young Pierre, barely 14, brought Henri's supper. The boy served as Moreau's apprentice, all eager energy and wide eyes. "Monsieur Moreau says you're to catalog mushrooms," he ventured. "Will you go to the Whispering Glade?" "Perhaps. Do you believe the stories?" The boy glanced around nervously. "My grandmother went there once. She heard her dead husband calling. Never was right after that. Monsieur Moreau says the forest guards its secrets, and wise men don't pry." Later, Henri stood at his window watching mist rise from the forest. Somewhere out there lay his real work, not just cataloging resources for a nobleman's profit, but understanding. The Whispering Glade intrigued him as any good mystery should intrigue a scientist. Tomorrow, he would begin properly, with method and patience, the tools that had never failed him. The morning of September 29th arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind that brought out late mushrooms and made the forest floor steam with released moisture. Henri met Moreau at the forest edge, where ancient oaks marked the boundary between cultivated land and wilderness. The gamekeeper carried a worn hunting rifle and moved with the careful economy of a man who measured energy against necessity. They had barely entered the deeper woods when they heard shouting, raw, panicked, human distress cutting through birdsong. Moreau quickened his pace, Henri following, until they emerged into a small clearing where two woodcutters supported a third man between them. The distressed man, perhaps 40, with the solid build of one who worked with axe and saw, trembled violently despite the morning's warmth. Jacques Ferrand, Moreau identified quietly. Good woodsman, not given to fancy. Ferrand's eyes rolled wildly, fixing on nothing. "She told me," he gasped. "My mother, dead these 15 years, she told me about the coins, about what I did." He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Dr. Laurent arrived within the hour, summoned by one of the woodcutters. Henri observed the physician's examination with professional interest. Charles Laurent was 41, precise in movement, skeptical by nature, qualities Henri appreciated. The doctor administered a mild sedative from his leather bag, while questioning the other woodcutters. "He went to mark trees near the Whispering Glade," one explained, cap twisted in nervous hands. "We warned him, but he laughed. Said only fools believed such tales. When he didn't return for lunch, we went looking. Found him like this, crawling on hands and knees, begging forgiveness from the empty air." Laurent caught Henri's eye, a silent acknowledgement between educated men. "Exhaustion," the doctor pronounced for the benefit of the crowd, "combined with heat and perhaps some spoiled food. Rest and quiet will restore him." But privately, as they helped load Ferrand onto a cart, Laurent murmured to Henri, "Third case this year. Always the same. They hear voices of the dead, revealing secrets. One woman tried to dig up her garden afterward, claiming her deceased father told her where he'd buried gold. Found nothing but stones. Henri's scientific curiosity sharpened. Patterns suggest natural causes, not supernatural. Has anyone investigated systematically? Who would dare? Laurent replied with Gallic practicality. The locals won't go near the place. And outsiders, well, they either flee in terror or disappear entirely. We lost a surveyor 2 years ago. Found him 3 days later, wandering the main road to Paris. Couldn't remember his own name for a week. After the woodcutters departed with their traumatized companion, Moreau stood silent, studying Henri with calculation. Finally he spoke. "You're thinking to investigate." "Knowledge dispels fear," Henri replied carefully. "If there's a natural explanation, toxic spores, perhaps, or gases from decaying matter, people should know." Moreau spat tobacco juice with remarkable accuracy at a beetle. "Some knowledge brings its own fears, monsieur. But you're the expert. I'll take you close, but I won't enter the glade itself. Man reaches my age by knowing his limits." They continued the day's survey, but Henri's mind remained fixed on the mystery. He collected specimens mechanically, common agaricus, some interesting cortinarius, a beautiful cluster of honey mushrooms that would fruit magnificently in 2 weeks' time. Moreau led him in a wide arc around the area he now understood to be the Whispering Glade, though the gamekeeper offered no acknowledgement of this deliberate avoidance. That evening, Henri found Dr. Laurent at the inn, dining alone with a medical journal. The doctor welcomed his company with obvious relief. "Madame Ferrand insists on sitting with her husband day and night," Laurent explained. "He keeps apologizing to his dead mother for stealing coins from her hidden savings 20 years ago. The family never knew about any money. Now they're tearing their cottage apart, searching. Mass delusion is well documented," Henri observed, though something nagged at him. "But specific, accurate information about private matters?" "Precisely what troubles me," Laurent agreed. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been keeping records. Every person who's experienced the phenomena reports hearing deceased relatives or friends, always revealing something secret, something true that the victim knew but had never shared. It's as if the place extracts hidden knowledge." Henri's rational mind rebelled at such mysticism, yet he filed the information carefully. After Laurent departed, he sat in the common room making notes by lamplight. Marguerite appeared with a pot of fresh coffee, moving quietly to avoid disturbing other guests. "Dr. Laurent looked troubled," she observed, pouring with steady hands. "The Theron case concerns him. You know the family?" She nodded slowly. "Good people, hard workers. Jacques, especially, supported his mother's final years, though they had little enough." "Strange he should hallucinate about stealing from her." "Unless it wasn't hallucination," Henri suggested carefully, watching her reaction. Marguerite's expression remained thoughtful rather than fearful. "The forest knows things," she said simply. "My mother believed that trees remember everything that happens beneath their branches. Perhaps at the Whispering Glade, they tell what they know." "You speak like someone who's been there." A shadow crossed her features. "Once, with my mother, gathering mushrooms when I was 12. We heard things. She made me promise never to return." She met his eyes directly. "I've kept that promise." Later, unable to sleep, Henri stood at his window watching clouds obscure the stars. The Baron expected a simple survey, quantifiable resources mapped and measured.
But Henri sensed something more complex here, a puzzle that might consume him if he let it.
He thought of Marie, how she'd laughed at his tendency to pursue questions beyond practical necessity. "You're not just a scientist," she'd said once. "You're a detective of the invisible world." Perhaps that's what the whispering glade needed, someone to detect the truth beneath its voices. September 30th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn morning that sharpened every detail of the forest into crystalline focus. Henri had persuaded Moreau to guide him closer to the whispering glade, though the gamekeeper's reluctance manifested in slower steps and frequent pauses to examine perfectly ordinary trees. They followed a deer path through dense undergrowth, brambles catching at Henri's canvas collecting bag. The forest grew older as they progressed, oaks with trunks so vast that 3 men linking hands couldn't encompass them. Their canopies so thick that understory plants grew pale and etiolated, reaching desperately for scattered coins of sunlight. "My grandfather remembered when the last wolves were killed here," Moreau offered suddenly, his voice unnaturally loud in the cathedral quiet. 1828 it was. The Baron's father led the hunt. 60 dogs, 30 men. The she-wolf fought to the end, protecting cubs that were already dead. Henri understood the gamekeeper was talking to fill the silence, to push back against something. The air had changed, not thicker exactly, but charged with potential, like the moments before lightning strikes. Even the birds sang differently here, their calls muffled and strange. They crested a small rise and Moreau stopped abruptly, pointing with his walking stick. "There, beyond those 3 oaks grown together, that's the edge of it." Henri could see nothing unusual at first, just a brighter space where the canopy opened. But as he watched, he noticed something odd about the quality of light there. It seemed to shimmer and fold, as if air itself had different properties. And there was sound, or rather, the suggestion of sound, like conversation heard through water. "We go no closer," Moreau stated flatly. "You want specimens? You collect here." Henri didn't argue. His scientific training had taught him the value of systematic observation before experimentation. He pulled out his notebook and began documenting everything: temperature, humidity, the peculiar acoustics, the types of vegetation at the glade's margin. And there, growing in the rich humus where oak shade met open ground, he found them. The fungi were extraordinary, cup-shaped, as his early hypothesis had suggested, but with a sophisticated structure he'd never encountered. Each cup, roughly the size of a child's palm, was oriented at a precise angle, creating natural parabolic receivers. They grew in clusters, dozens upon dozens, their arrangement seemingly random, yet somehow purposeful. "Pizziza," Henri muttered, kneeling carefully, "but not any variant I know." The cups were deep amber when young, darkening to mahogany with age. Their inner surface was smooth as polished wood, perfect for reflecting sound waves. He collected several specimens, noting their unusual density and the way they seemed to grow in acoustic correspondence with each other. Moreau watched from a safe distance, rifle across his knees. "Never seen you scientific types so excited about mushrooms," he observed. "Though I suppose every man has his passion." Henri was about to respond when the wind shifted, carrying sound from the glade's center. For a moment, just a heartbeat, he could have sworn he heard Marie's voice, laughing at one of his elaborate explanations of spore dispersal. He froze, specimen knife trembling in his hand. "You heard something," Moreau said. It wasn't a question. "Wind in the leaves," Henri replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The gamekeeper's expression suggested he knew better, but wouldn't press the point. They worked in silence for another hour, Henri collecting samples of soil, associated plants, even insects found near the peculiar fungi. He sketched the overall growth pattern, made notes about the acoustic properties he could observe from this safe distance. Professional focus helped push away that moment of auditory illusion, for surely that's all it had been. As they prepared to leave, Moreau did something unexpected. He pulled a small leather flask from his jacket, took a sip, and offered it to Henri. The brandy burned warm against the forest's chill. "My father was gamekeeper before me," Moreau said quietly, "and his father before that. We've all known about the Glade. Each generation thinks they'll be the one to explain it, make it safe. But some things," he paused, choosing words carefully, "some things are meant to remain mysteries. They serve a purpose that way." That evening, Henri spread his specimens across the inn's back parlor table, a room Marguerite had cleared for his use. She brought him a lamp and lingered, genuinely curious about his findings. "I've never seen fungi quite like these," she admitted, examining one through his hand lens. "The structure is so precise, almost manufactured." Henri explained his theory about acoustic properties, how the cup shape could capture and amplify sound. Marguerite listened with the focused attention of someone who understood the importance of details. She told him about other local legends, a stone that wept, a tree that bled, all eventually explained by natural phenomena. "But the Whispering Glade is different," she added, adjusting the lamp to better illuminate a specimen. "The stories go back centuries. My mother found references in the church records from the 1600s. Always the same, voices of the dead revealing secrets." Father Bernard arrived as they worked, drawn by news of Henri's investigation. The priest was 64, scholarly, with ink-stained fingers and the slight stoop of a man who spent his life over books. He examined the fungi with interest, but kept glancing at Henri with concern. "You mean to return, don't you?" the priest asked finally. "To enter the Glade itself?" "Knowledge requires investigation, Father. If these fungi produce some chemical that causes hallucinations—" "And if they don't?" Bernard interrupted gently. "If the explanation isn't so simple. I've been collecting stories about that place for 20 years, Monsieur Roussel. The voices people hear, they're not random hallucinations. They're specific, accurate, revealing things only the dead could know." Henri's scientific mind rebelled, but he kept his tone respectful. "Then there must be another explanation. Perhaps the fungi release compounds that access buried memories, things we know but don't consciously remember." The priest smiled sadly. "I hope you're right. I truly do. Because the alternative, that there are places where the boundary between living and dead grows thin, that's not something science can fix with classification and chemical analysis." October arrived with morning frosts that silvered the inn's windows and made Henri's breath visible as he worked in the converted parlor. 3 days of intensive study had transformed the space into a makeshift laboratory. Specimens arranged by development stage, detailed drawings pinned to the walls, chemical reagents borrowed from Dr. Laurent lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. The fungi defied conventional classification. Under his microscope, Henri discovered structures that shouldn't exist in any known Peziza species. Specialized cells arranged in patterns that reminded him uncomfortably of the human inner ear. He'd written to colleagues in Paris, carefully describing his findings without mentioning the Whispering Glade by name. Professional reputation required caution when dealing with phenomena that bordered on sensational. Marguerite had become an invaluable assistant, her knowledge of local flora helping him understand the ecological relationships at play. She worked beside him in comfortable silence, preparing spore prints with steady hands while he conducted chemical tests. Her presence had become something he looked forward to, not romantic, not yet, but a warmth that thawed edges frozen since Marie's death. "These results make no sense," Henri muttered, staring at his latest experiment. He'd exposed the fungi to various sound frequencies using a tuning fork set. Each specimen responded differently, some cups contracting, others expanding, as if they were tuned to specific wavelengths. "Perhaps they're meant to work together," Marguerite suggested, arranging several specimens in the pattern he'd sketched from the glade's edge. Like an orchestra, each playing its part in a larger composition. The insight was brilliant. Henri immediately began testing combinations, documenting how the fungi seemed to create acoustic interference patterns when properly arranged. The mathematics involved were complex, beyond his expertise, but the implications were staggering. Nature had evolved an organic amplification system of extraordinary sophistication. A knock interrupted their work. Young Pierre entered, cap in hand, nervous energy radiating from his thin frame. "Monsieur Moreau sends word. The Baron arrives tomorrow. He expects a preliminary report." Henri's stomach tightened. Baron de Montmorency wasn't known for patience or scientific curiosity. He wanted marketable resources, profitable yields, not mysterious fungi that might require protection rather than exploitation. That evening, Henri dined with Dr. Laurent, who'd brought interesting news. "I've been researching medical records," the doctor explained, cutting his beef with surgical precision. "Every person who's experienced the Glade's phenomena shows similar symptoms afterward. Elevated heart rate persisting for days, pupils that dilate unusually in low light, and most curious, enhanced auditory sensitivity that fades over roughly 2 weeks. Consistent with exposure to certain alkaloid compounds," Henri observed. "The fungi might produce something similar to ergot derivatives, though much more sophisticated." Laurent leaned forward. "There's more. I found a journal from my predecessor, Dr. Michaud, from 1868. He attempted to study the Glade scientifically, spent 3 consecutive days there. His notes become increasingly erratic, but one passage stands out. He writes, "The fungi don't create the voices, they translate them." The forest remembers everything, stores it somehow in root and soil. The Glade is where it speaks. What happened to him? Committed to an asylum in Paris, died there 5 years later, insisting to the end that trees could think and mountains could dream. Laurent's expression was grave. His widow burned most of his papers, but she missed the journal. It was hidden in his medical bag. Henri spent that night preparing his report for the Baron, struggling to balance truth with discretion. He wrote of interesting fungi with potential pharmaceutical applications, of unique acoustic properties worth preserving for study. He didn't mention voices, or madness, or the way his hands shook slightly when he remembered that moment of hearing Marie's laugh. October 3rd brought the Baron in a black carriage with brass fittings, accompanied by 2 men who looked more like enforcers than servants. Philippe de Montmorency was 45, athletic, with the casual arrogance of inherited wealth. He listened to Henri's careful presentation with visible impatience. "Mushrooms," the Baron said flatly. "You're telling me the most mysterious spot in my forest, the place locals have feared for generations, is just mushrooms." "Extraordinary mushrooms," Henri corrected, "with properties that could revolutionize our understanding of natural acoustics. They deserve protection and study, not exploitation." The Baron's laugh was humorless. "Protection doesn't pay taxes, Monsieur Roussel. I hired you to identify resources, not create nature preserves." He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "You have 1 week to complete your survey. I expect practical recommendations, not fairy tales about singing fungi." After the Baron departed, Henri sat alone in the parlor, surrounded by his specimens and notes. Marguerite found him there as evening fell, bringing coffee and her quiet companionship. "You could tell him what he wants to hear," she suggested gently. "Recommend clearing the glade for timber. Once the fungi are destroyed, the voices will stop." Henri looked at her in surprise. "You believe destroying them would end the phenomena?" "I believe some mysteries serve a purpose," she replied, echoing Moreau's words. "The glade keeps people away from that part of the forest. Remove the fear, and the Baron will strip it bare within a year. Sometimes, monsieur, the truth is less important than the effect of the truth." Her pragmatism should have offended his scientific principles, but Henri found himself considering her words. Outside, wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the darkness, the forest held its secrets close, waiting for him to decide what story he would tell. The 4th of October brought unseasonable fog that transformed the forest into a realm of shadows and suggestion. Henri had risen before dawn, unable to sleep, after discovering something troubling in his notes. The pattern of fungi growth he'd mapped seemed deliberately maintained, not naturally occurring. Someone had been cultivating the acoustic properties of the glade. He decided to follow Moreau discreetly, a decision that went against his nature, but seemed necessary given the gamekeeper's increasingly suspicious behavior. The older man left his cottage at first light, moving through the fog with purpose. Henri tracked him at a distance, grateful for the muffling mist that concealed his inexpert woodcraft. Moreau's path led not to the whispering glade, but to a series of hidden clearings nearby. Henri watched from behind a massive oak as the gamekeeper checked carefully concealed hunting blinds, each positioned along game trails. The constructions were masterful, woven branches and bark that seemed to grow from the forest itself. In one, Henri glimpsed the remains of a recent kill, professionally butchered. The truth crystallized with scientific clarity. Moreau was poaching, using the fear of the whispering glade to keep this rich hunting ground private. The blinds were positioned in a ring around the glade, creating a protected zone where deer and wild boar could thrive undisturbed, only to be harvested selectively for what Henri suspected was a lucrative black market in game meat. A twig snapped behind him. Henri spun to find young Pierre, watching him with wide, frightened eyes. The boy looked between Henri and the distant figure of Moreau, torn between loyalties. "Please, monsieur," Pierre whispered, "you don't understand. He's not a bad man. The Baron's family took the common lands, made criminals of men who'd hunted here for generations. Monsieur Moreau feeds half the village with what he finds." Henri studied the boy's earnest face, recognizing the complexity that his scientific training often tried to reduce to simple categories. "And the glade?"
Does he maintain the fungi there? Pierre's expression shifted to genuine confusion.
The Glade tends itself, monsieur. Even Monsieur Moreau won't go there. He says it's the forest's way of protecting itself, creating a place so fearsome that men like the Baron won't dare develop it.
They parted ways in the fog, Pierre to his duties, Henri to his troubled thoughts. Back at the inn, he found an unexpected visitor, Father Bernard, waiting with a leather-bound journal that smelled of age and secrecy.
"I've been debating whether to show you this," the priest began without preamble. "It's from my predecessor, Father Antoine, from 1843. He was interested in what we might call natural theology. The idea that God reveals himself through creation's mysteries." The journal was written in cramped Latin, which Henri could read well enough. Father Antoine had studied the whispering glade for years, documenting patterns. The voices followed rules. They only spoke truth, only revealed secrets that burdened the living, and most remarkably, they seemed to offer a form of confession that brought peace to some who experienced them. He believed the glade was a natural confessional, Father Bernard explained. A place where the earth itself granted absolution by forcing truth into the light. He spent his final years protecting it from the church authorities who would have had it destroyed as demonic. Henri turned pages carefully, finding detailed drawings of the fungi from 50 years past, identical to his current specimens. No evolution, no change, as if the glade existed outside normal biological time. "Why show me this?" Henri asked. "Because you're going to enter the glade properly, aren't you? Not just observe from the edges, but experience it fully." The priest's eyes held deep concern. "If you do, you should know everyone who enters hears something true that changes them. The question isn't whether you'll hear voices, but whether you're prepared for what they might say." That afternoon, Marguerite helped Henri prepare for deeper investigation. She'd brought tinctures and preparations from her mother's collection, remedies for vertigo, panic, and what her notes called soul sickness. Her fingers brushed his as she handed him the vials, and Henri caught her scent, lavender and something earthier, like fresh-turned soil. "My mother went there once more before she died," Marguerite said quietly. "She heard my father's voice, though he was still alive, sitting right beside her. He was confessing to an affair she'd suspected but never confirmed. They never spoke of it, but she knew, and he knew she knew." The marriage survived, but changed. Henri wanted to offer comfort, but found himself thinking of Marie, of secrets they'd kept even from each other, small kindnesses and smaller betrayals that death had left unresolved. Dr. Laurent arrived as evening fell, bringing results from Paris. A colleague at the Sorbonne had analyzed Henri's samples, finding compounds similar to those in certain cave fungi that could absorb and re-emit sounds over time, like biological recording devices. Theoretically, the fungi could store acoustic patterns in their cellular structure, releasing them when triggered by specific conditions. But storing actual words, sentences, meanings? Laurent shook his head. That would require a level of organization that borders on intelligence. We're speaking of fungi, not philosophers. Henri thought of the patterns he'd observed, the sophisticated arrangements, the way the glade seemed to select which truths to reveal. Intelligence might not be the right word, but there was something intentional at work, something that transcended simple biology. That night, he dreamed of Marie standing in the glade, cups of amber fungi at her feet like offerings, her mouth moving with words he couldn't quite hear but desperately needed to understand. October 5th arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of morning that seemed to sharpen every edge and deepen every shadow. Henri stood at the forest entrance at dawn, his collecting equipment supplemented with the preparations Marguerite had provided. Small vials of tincture tucked into his vest pockets like talismans against whatever awaited him in the Glade's heart. He went alone, having deliberately avoided informing Moreau of his plans. The path was familiar now, his feet finding their way through the undergrowth with growing confidence. As he approached the Glade, the quality of sound began to change. Not quite voices yet, but a susurration like wind through leaves, except the air was perfectly still. The transition from forest to Glade was more dramatic than he'd expected. One moment he was pushing through a thicket of hazel. The next, he stood at the edge of an almost perfect circle, perhaps 30 meters across, carpeted with thousands upon thousands of the amber cup fungi. They grew in spirals and whorls, creating patterns that seemed both natural and impossibly deliberate, like script written in a language of living things. The morning sun slanted through gaps in the surrounding oaks, illuminating the cups so they glowed like beaten copper. And the sound? Henri's scientific mind catalogued it even as his heart rate accelerated, was extraordinary. Each cup seemed to capture and modify ambient noise, creating harmonics and interference patterns that built upon each other until the air itself hummed with potential meaning. He stepped into the Glade, notebook and pencil ready, determined to document everything with scientific precision. The fungi were even more remarkable up close. Their arrangement followed mathematical principles he recognized: Fibonacci spirals, golden ratios, the kind of natural geometries that appeared in nautilus shells and sunflower heads. But here, they seemed purposeful, designed. The first whisper came as he knelt to examine a particularly large specimen. Not Marie's voice, as he'd feared and perhaps hoped, but his father's, dead these 15 years. "The money from the Durand contract," the voice said, clear as if spoken beside his ear. "I kept half. Never told your mother. It's still in the wine cellar wall, behind the loose stone." Henri's hand trembled as he made notes. His father had been a master carpenter, honest to a fault, or so Henri had believed. The Durand contract had been for renovating their local church. If his father had kept money meant for sacred work. More whispers came as he moved deeper into the Glade. Some voices he recognized, others were strangers, but all spoke secrets with the casual tone of ordinary conversation. A woman confessed to poisoning her husband's mistress. A child admitted to starting the fire that destroyed the village mill. Each revelation hung in the air like a soap bubble, beautiful and terrible, before dissolving into the general murmur. Henri forced himself to observe objectively, to note patterns. The fungi seemed to respond to his presence, cups tilting slightly as he passed, creating acoustic channels that directed specific voices toward him. He collected samples, measured angles, sketched arrangements, all while fighting the growing sensation that the Glade was examining him in return. Then he heard it, Marie's laugh, but bitter, not the warm sound he remembered. "The baby," her voice said, and Henri's knees nearly buckled. "I lost it on purpose. The herbs from the old woman in Montmartre. I wasn't ready to share you with anyone, not even our child.
The pencil fell from nerveless fingers. They'd tried for children their entire marriage, Marie growing increasingly despondent with each failed pregnancy. She'd blamed herself, her body, God's will. Henri had comforted her through countless nights of tears, never suspecting. He stumbled to a fallen log at the Glade's edge, breathing hard. The scientific part of his mind noted his symptoms: elevated pulse, dilated pupils, mild vertigo, consistent with exposure to psychoactive compounds. But the emotional part, the human part, wrestled with a truth that rewrote 5 years of marriage. The sun climbed higher, and gradually the whispers faded to background murmur, then to silence.
Henry sat in that quiet for a long time, surrounded by beauty and revelation, understanding now why people fled this place in terror. Not because the voices lied, but because they told truths that dismantled carefully constructed lives. When he finally gathered strength to leave, Henry noticed something he'd missed before. At the Glade's exact center grew a single cup fungus, different from the others, pure white, large as a dinner plate. He approached it cautiously, knelt, and heard not a voice, but something like the forest's own breathing, the accumulated sighs of centuries of growth and decay and secrets absorbed into soil and root. He collected no sample of the white fungus. Some things, he was learning, were meant to remain undisturbed. The walk back to the inn took twice as long as usual, his legs unsteady, his mind reeling. He encountered no one, for which he was grateful. His reflection in the inn's window showed a man aged by hours, the same features, but somehow rearranged by knowledge. Marguerite took one look at him and guided into a chair without questions. She brought brandy, not coffee, and sat across from him in silence until he was ready to speak. "The voices," he said finally, hoarsely, "they're real, not hallucinations, not suggestions. Real voices speaking real truths." She nodded slowly, unsurprised. "The forest remembers everything that happens beneath its branches. The glade is where it shares what it knows. The question now is what you'll do with that knowledge." The 6th of October came wrapped in gray wool clouds that promised rain but withheld it, leaving the air thick with anticipation. Henri had slept poorly, his dreams populated by whispers and Marie's bitter laugh. He rose early, finding Dr. Laurent already waiting in the inn's common room with Father Bernard, their faces grave with concern. "You went in," Laurent said without preamble. "The pupils, the tremor in your hands, classic signs. What did you hear?" Henri considered his words carefully. These men had become something like friends over the past week, but the secret Marie's voice had revealed felt too raw to share. Truths I wasn't prepared for. Things that change how I understand my past. Father Bernard leaned forward. "The Glade has that effect. It strips away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. Some call it cruel, but I wonder if it isn't a form of mercy, forcing us to confront what festers in darkness." They were interrupted by young Pierre, who burst through the door, wide-eyed and breathless. "Monsieur, you must come! Monsieur Moreau, he's taken his gun to the Glade, says he'll burn it all if anyone tries to stop him." The 3 men exchanged alarmed glances and followed the boy into the forest. They found Moreau at the Glade's edge, rifle across his knees, a can of kerosene at his feet. His weathered face was set in lines of desperate determination. "Stay back," the gamekeeper warned, though the rifle remained pointed at the ground. 50 years I've protected this place, used its reputation to keep the forest safe. But now you've studied it, cataloged it, made it comprehensible. The Baron will want to exploit it somehow, charge admission to hear the dead speak,
turn mystery into commodity. Henri approached slowly, hands visible and empty. That's not what I intend, Gustave. My report won't encourage exploitation. Your intentions don't matter, Moreau spat. Men like the Baron take what they want. My grandfather knew that when they enclosed the common lands. My father knew it when they banned traditional hunting. And I know it now watching them measure and monetize every tree, every stream. The gamekeeper stood, reaching for the kerosene, but Pierre suddenly stepped forward. Tell them about the hunting, monsieur. Tell them the truth. Moreau's hand paused.
He looked at his apprentice with something between betrayal and relief. You know? I've always known, Pierre said quietly. The whole village knows. We also know you fed families who would have starved otherwise, that you take only what the forest can spare, that you protect this place better than any law. Henri seized the moment of vulnerability. Gustave, I know about the blinds, the poaching. I also know you're not just a criminal, but a guardian. The Glade needs protection, yes, but burning it won't stop the Baron. He'll simply clear the land for timber, and everything, the mystery, the hunting grounds, all of it, will be lost. Moreau's shoulders sagged, the rifle lowered completely. Then what do you propose, scientist? How do we protect something that shouldn't exist in your rational world? It was Father Bernard who answered, by telling a different truth. One that serves a greater good. That afternoon, they gathered in the inn's private parlor, an unlikely conspiracy of scientist, doctor, priest, gamekeeper, and the innkeeper's daughter. Marguerite had brought maps of the forest, some dating back a century, showing traditional boundaries and rights that predated the Baron's family claim. The Glade sits on what was once church land, Father Bernard explained, tracing boundaries with one ink-stained finger. Donated in the 14th century for a hermitage that was never built. Technically, it still belongs to the parish, though the records are unclear. Dr. Laurent added his medical perspective. I can document the psychological dangers of the Glade. Recommend it be quarantined for public safety. Combined with Henri's scientific report on the fungi's pharmaceutical potential, requiring years of careful study before any commercial application, we can make exploitation seem both dangerous and unprofitable. Henri spent that evening crafting his report with newfound purpose. He wrote of remarkable fungi with complex alkaloid compounds that could indeed have medical applications, but only after extensive research. He emphasized the delicate ecological balance, how disturbing the Glade could destroy valuable scientific opportunities. He mentioned, almost in passing, the acoustic phenomena that could cause disorientation and psychological distress in visitors. Every word was true. He simply chose which truths to emphasize. Marguerite worked beside him, her practical intelligence helping shape arguments the Baron would find compelling. As night deepened, their hands occasionally touched over shared papers, and Henri felt something he'd thought died with Marie, the possibility of connection, of building something new on ground fertilized by loss. The Glade changed you, she observed during a break for coffee. It showed me that my past isn't what I thought. My marriage, my understanding of Marie, all of it needs re-examination. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Sometimes the dead reveal secrets not to hurt us, but to free us, to let us stop carrying weights that were never ours to bear. Outside, wind stirred the trees, and somewhere in the darkness, the whispering Glade held its vigil, keeper of secrets and unwanted truths. Tomorrow, Henri would present his report to the Baron, But tonight, surrounded by unlikely allies, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Marie's death. The sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. The 8th of October brought cold rain that drummed against the inn's windows like impatient fingers. Henri sat across from Moreau in the gamekeeper's modest cottage, the space between them heavy with unspoken truths. The older man had requested this private meeting, and Henri had come alone, sensing the importance of what would be revealed. 23 years I've been gamekeeper, Moreau began, his hands wrapped around a mug of bitter tea. Before that, my father. Before him, his father. Each generation we learned the real job wasn't just managing game for the nobles' hunt. It was protecting the forest from the nobles themselves. He rose, moving to an old cabinet, and withdrew a leathered journal, its pages yellowed with age. Every poached deer, every illegal trap, every tree taken for desperate firewood, it's all here. Names, dates, what was taken, and why. The widow Laurent's children were starving in the winter of '87. The Michaud family needed timber after the fire destroyed their cottage. Crimes by law, survival by necessity. Henri examined the meticulous records, understanding their significance. This was evidence of systematic poaching, enough to send Moreau to prison for decades, yet it was also a chronicle of compassion, of a man navigating between legal obligation and moral duty. "Why show me this?" Henri asked. "Because you need to understand what you're protecting, not just mysterious fungi or scientific curiosities, but a way of life that's disappearing." Moreau's weathered face showed every one of his 52 years. The Baron's grandfather enclosed the commons, made criminals of men who'd gathered deadwood for centuries. His father instituted the hunting licenses only nobles could afford. And now this Baron wants to turn what's left into profit, timber sales, tourist attractions, anything that makes money. The gamekeeper returned to his seat, suddenly looking fragile despite his solid frame. The whispering glade terrifies people, keeps them away. That fear protects more than you know. Rare orchids, ancient badger sets, the last wild spaces where creatures can live undisturbed. If you make it safe, comprehensible, you destroy its power to protect. Henri considered this carefully, thinking of his report, of the delicate balance between truth and purpose. Yet the complete truth also has power. If people understood the Glade's true nature, they'd exploit it worse than timber, Moreau interrupted. Imagine, come hear your dead relatives speak, 5 francs for 15 minutes. The Baron would build a hotel, a railway spur. The forest would become a carnival. A knock interrupted them. Young Pierre entered, soaking wet, his usual energy dampened by worry.
"The Baron's men are asking questions in the village. They want to know what you've really been doing, Monsieur Roussel. They say the Baron suspects you're hiding something valuable." This was troubling news. Henri had underestimated the Baron's suspicion, his network of informants. If the full truth about the Glade's properties became known before Henri could frame it properly, everything they'd planned would fail. They returned to the inn to find an unexpected scene. Dr. Laurent was treating a young woman, one of the Baron's servant girls, who'd collapsed in the common room. She was conscious but disoriented, pupils dilated, muttering about voices in the walls. "She hasn't been to the Glade," Laurent said quietly to Henri. "But look at this."
He showed Henri a small cloth bag the girl had been carrying, filled with dried fungi, unmistakably from the Glade. Marguerite interrogated the kitchen staff with calm authority, uncovering the truth quickly.
The Baron's men had been buying specimens from anyone willing to venture near the Glade, offering good silver for what they called medicinal mushrooms. Someone had been drying them, concentrating their properties, selling them as folk remedies for guilt and grief. If these reach Paris, Laurent warned, if someone with chemical knowledge analyzes them properly. Henri understood the implications. The secret would become commodity. The mystery transformed into product. He made a decision that went against every scientific principle he'd held sacred. That evening, he met secretly with Moreau in the forest. Together, they visited each hidden blind, each carefully maintained game trail. Henri helped the gamekeeper dismantle the evidence of poaching, scatter the constructions that had taken years to perfect. It was destruction in service of preservation, choosing which truth would survive.
"You're sacrificing your life's work," Henri observed, as they broke apart a particularly clever hide. Moreau's smile was grim but not bitter. "Better to sacrifice it myself than have it taken. Besides, the forest will remain. That's all that matters."
They worked through the night, rain soaking through their coats, removing traces of human intervention from the wild spaces. By dawn, the hunting grounds looked untouched, as if man had never imposed his will on the ancient woods. Back at the inn, exhausted and muddy, Henri found Marguerite waiting with hot coffee and dry clothes. She didn't ask where he'd been. Her eyes held understanding and something else, something that warmed him more than the coffee. "The Baron arrives tomorrow," she said simply. "His men have been boasting in their cups. He plans to take control of your investigation, bring in his own scientists from Paris. Whatever you mean to do, it must be today." Henri nodded, feeling the weight of decision.
He had one day to craft a truth that would protect the Glade, the forest, and the people who depended on both. One day to balance science and mystery, knowledge and preservation. The whispers from the Glade seemed to follow him as he climbed to his room, reminding him that some truths, once spoken, could never be taken back. October 9th dawned with deceptive calm, sunlight breaking through the previous day's clouds to paint the forest in shades of gold and rust. The Baron's carriage arrived before noon, accompanied this time by a larger retinue, servants, guards, and, most troublingly, a thin man in city clothes whom Henri recognized as Professor Dubois from the Academy of Sciences, a researcher known for his aggressive pursuit of pharmaceutical patents. They convened in the inn's largest room, the Baron presiding like a judge while Henri presented his carefully crafted report. He spoke of the fungi's remarkable acoustic properties, their potential for medical research, the delicate ecological balance that required protection. Every word was measured, scientific, deliberately drained of mystery. "Fascinating," Professor Dubois interrupted, his voice sharp as a scalpel. "But my preliminary analysis of the specimens acquired locally suggests something far more remarkable. These fungi contain compounds that could revolutionize the treatment of nervous disorders, perhaps even access repressed memories. The commercial potential is enormous." The Baron leaned forward, eyes glinting with avarice. "How enormous?" "If we can synthesize the active compounds, we're discussing millions of francs. Every asylum in Europe would purchase such treatments. But first, we need extensive samples, perhaps the entire colony, for proper study."
Henri felt the carefully constructed protection crumbling. He glanced at Father Bernard, who stepped forward with unexpected authority. "I'm afraid that's impossible, gentlemen. I've been researching the land rights, and the Glade sits on church property, donated in perpetuity for spiritual purposes. Commercial exploitation would require Vatican approval, which, given the disturbing nature of the phenomena, would certainly be denied." The Baron's face darkened. "Nonsense. My family has hunted those woods for generations." "Hunting rights, yes." Father Bernard produced a sheaf of aged documents, "but not ownership. These papers, authenticated by the bishop himself, clearly establish ecclesiastical authority over the specific area in question." While the Baron examined the documents with growing fury, Dr. Laurent added his medical testimony. "Furthermore, I must warn against any extensive harvesting. 3 people have already suffered severe psychological distress from exposure to concentrated doses. 1 attempted suicide, claiming the voices of the dead commanded it. As district's medical officer, I'm obligated to declare the area a health hazard." The Baron stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is coordinated obstruction. You've all conspired to deny me what's rightfully mine." "What's rightfully yours," Moreau said quietly from the doorway, having entered unnoticed, "is the managed forest, the sustainable game, the timber harvests your father and grandfather maintained. Not every secret, not every mystery." The tension in the room crystallized into something dangerous. The Baron's guards shifted slightly, hands moving toward weapons. But Marguerite chose that moment to enter with a tea service, her presence somehow diffusing the immediate threat. "Perhaps," she suggested mildly, pouring tea with steady hands, "there's a solution that serves everyone's interests." Henri recognized his cue. The Baron could sponsor a long-term scientific study with his name attached to any discoveries. The prestige of supporting pure research, of protecting a unique natural phenomenon, would enhance his reputation considerably. Think of it, the Montmorency Foundation for Natural Philosophy. He could see the Baron calculating, weighing profit against prestige. Professor Dubois started to protest, but the Baron silenced him with a gesture. "And the stories? The voices? What do I tell people about those?" "The truth," Henri said simply, "that the fungi create acoustic distortions that can trigger auditory hallucinations in susceptible individuals. That the Church maintains the site for historical reasons, that you, as a responsible landowner, are ensuring public safety while supporting scientific advancement." It was a masterful weaving of fact and interpretation, giving the Baron a narrative that preserved his authority while protecting the Glade. The nobleman considered for long moments while rain began to patter against the windows again. "I want regular reports," he finally stated. "And any commercial applications developed must acknowledge my family's patronage." "Of course," Henri agreed, knowing that his reports would be truthful but incomplete, that any commercial applications would take decades to develop, if ever. The meeting dissolved into logistics and legalities, the immediate crisis averted. But as the Baron's carriage departed, Henri noticed Professor Dubois lingering, examining everything with calculating eyes. This man would bear watching. That evening, the conspirators gathered again in the inn's parlor: Henri, Marguerite, Father Bernard, Dr. Laurent, and Moreau. Young Pierre served wine with barely contained excitement, understanding that they'd won something important. "It's temporary," Moreau warned. "The Baron will grow impatient.
or Dubois will return with better arguments. We've bought time, nothing more." "Time is all anyone ever buys," Father Bernard observed philosophically.
The question is how we use it. Henri looked around the room at these people who'd become unexpectedly dear to him: the pragmatic doctor, the protective gamekeeper, the wise priest, the eager boy, and Marguerite, whose intelligence and courage had proven essential, whose presence had begun to fill spaces he'd thought would remain empty forever. "We use it to protect what matters," Henri said, "to document the truth while preserving the mystery, to ensure that some places remain beyond the reach of those who would reduce wonder to profit." Outside, the forest settled into evening, and somewhere in its depths, the whispering glade continued its ancient work, translating secrets into sound, offering truth to those brave enough to hear it. The 15th of October arrived with the first true frost of autumn, silvering the forest floor and making the air sharp as glass. Henri stood in his room at the inn, packing his specimens and notes with the careful precision that had defined his life, yet everything felt different now. The man who'd arrived from Paris 2 weeks ago seemed like a stranger, someone who believed mysteries existed only to be solved, that truth was always preferable to wonder. Marguerite helped him organize his materials, her presence both comfort and ache. They'd spoken carefully around the growing connection between them, neither quite ready to name what was developing in the space Marie's ghost had vacated. Or perhaps not vacated, transformed. The Glade's revelation about Marie's secret had initially felt like betrayal, but over these days, Henri had come to understand it differently. She'd been as human as he, as frightened, as imperfect. The pedestal he'd placed her on had been his construction, not her request. "Your report to the museum," Marguerite said, securing a box of preserved specimens. "Will you tell them everything?" "I'll tell them enough, that I've discovered a remarkable species of fungi with unique acoustic properties, that further study is warranted, that the site requires protection." He paused in his packing. "Science demands truth, but not all truth demands immediate revelation. Some discoveries need time to ripen, like wine in the cellar." Dr. Laurent arrived to bid farewell, bringing news that made Henri's smile grimly. Professor Dubois had attempted to return secretly 2 nights prior, only to become hopelessly lost in the forest despite his compass and maps. Moreau had found him at dawn, weeping like a child, claiming the trees had moved to confuse him. Whether it was the gamekeeper's woodcraft or something more mysterious, the result was the same. Dubois had returned to Paris, declaring the entire forest cursed. "The mind sees what it expects," Laurent observed. "Dubois expected profit and found madness. You expected mystery and found truth. Perhaps we each discover what we deserve." Father Bernard blessed Henri's journey with quiet words that felt more like friendship than ritual. The priest had already begun documenting the Glade's history more thoroughly, creating records that would protect it through bureaucracy, if not through fear. "Mystery and knowledge aren't opposites," he said, pressing a small wooden cross into Henri's palm. "They're dance partners, each giving meaning to the other." Young Pierre helped carry Henri's luggage to the carriage, chattering about his plans to study the forest's flora more systematically. Moreau had agreed to teach him not just hunting but conservation, understanding that the old ways needed new defenders. The boy's enthusiasm reminded Henri of his own younger self, before loss and time had tempered his certainty. Moreau himself stood apart, watching the loading with his habitual reserve. But as Henri approached to say farewell, the gamekeeper extended his hand,
calloused, strong, honest. You did well, scientist. Better than I expected. As did you, Guardian. Better than you know. They understood each other now. Two men protecting the same thing from different angles, with different tools, but identical purpose. The hardest farewell was Marguerite. They stood in the inn's garden, autumn roses still blooming despite the frost, neither quite meeting the other's eyes. "You'll return," she said, not a question, but not quite a statement either. "My research requires it. The museum will want continued observation, seasonal variations documented." He paused, gathering courage. "And there are other reasons. Connections that deserve exploration." She smiled then, the expression transforming her face from handsome to beautiful. "I'll be here. The forest isn't the only thing that rewards patience." She pressed something into his hand, a small cloth bag of herbs. "For peaceful sleep," she explained. "The city can be its own kind of haunted. These will help you remember that not all whispers are threatening." The carriage ride to Melun station passed in contemplation. Henri watched the forest recede, knowing he carried its secrets with him, not just in his specimen cases, but in his bones, in the space between heartbeats where truth lived. The whispering glade had shown him that knowledge wasn't about possession, but about relationship, that mysteries weren't puzzles to solve, but conversations to engage. At the station, waiting for the Paris train, Henri opened his notebook to review his final observations. But instead of scientific notes, he found himself writing a letter to Marguerite, words flowing like spores on wind. "The glade taught me that forests remember everything, every secret, every sorrow, every small joy pressed into bark and soil. But it also taught me that memory isn't prison, but possibility."
We carry our dead not as burdens, but as soil from which new things grow. The mushrooms understand this, translating death into life, silence into speech, isolation into connection. He would post the letter from Paris, the first of many. Through winter, they would correspond, building with words what proximity had only suggested. By spring, when he returned to continue his research, they would be ready for whatever grew from the ground they'd prepared. The train arrived in clouds of steam and mechanical certainty. Henri boarded, found his compartment, arranged his luggage with habitual precision. As the locomotive pulled away from Fontainebleau, he thought he heard, carried on the wind, the faintest echo of whispers from the glade. But now they seemed less like voices of the dead than the forest itself speaking, promising that secrets would be kept, that mysteries would endure, that some places would remain forever beyond the reach of those who confused price with value. Henri smiled, closing his eyes, feeling the weight of the wooden cross in his pocket and the lightness of possibility in his chest. He was returning to Paris, changed, carrying within him the knowledge that truth and mystery could coexist, that science and wonder were not enemies, but allies in the great work of understanding. The glade would continue its ancient purpose, protected now by law and legend alike. And he would return, not as conqueror, but as student, ready to learn whatever the forest felt ready to teach. The train carried him toward the city, toward duty and December cold. But part of him remained in the forest, in the space between sound and silence, where the fungi grew, translating the ineffable into whispers that sounded almost like wisdom.